Suspend the agreement. For words appeared on the conference room screen, and in less than 3 seconds, 12 executives stopped breathing. At the head of the polished walnut table, Jonathan Pierce stared at the message as though it had arrived from the wreckage of a future he had already promised to shareholders. Behind him, a presentation glowed across a wall-sized display. Orion Global Partnership for $8 billion strategic expansion. The numbers had been rehearsed for months. New international routes. Smarter cargo systems. Thousands of jobs. A technology platform that could push Sterling Atlantic Airlines ahead of every major competitor in America. Champagne waited unopened beside crystal glasses. Legal teams sat with final contracts stacked neatly in front of them. Outside the 43rd floor windows, Manhattan shimmered beneath a pale morning sky, calm and distant, unaware that an empire had just stumbled. "Call her," Jonathan said. No one moved. His voice hardened. "Call Dr. Brooks now." The chief financial officer reached for his phone, but before he could dial, another message appeared. Agreement suspended pending ethical review. Activate contingency clause. A quiet sound escaped someone near the far end of the table. Not a word. More like the breath of a person watching billions of dollars disappear in real time. Jonathan turned toward the general counsel. What triggered the clause? She looked down at her tablet, scanning rapidly. A material conduct violation involving Sterling personnel. Where? At one of our airports. Which employee? She hesitated. We don't know yet. Jonathan's face tightened. 47 minutes earlier, Dr. Vanessa Brooks had stepped through the sliding glass doors of Sterling Atlantic's flagship terminal, carrying one small suitcase and wearing a simple camel-colored coat. No motorcade followed her. No assistant carried her documents. No security team cleared a path. She looked like any other business traveler arriving early for a morning flight, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Vanessa had built Orion Global from a rented office above a laundromat in Baltimore into one of the most powerful logistics and artificial intelligence companies in the country. Her decisions moved markets. Her contracts reshaped industries. But that morning, none of it was visible. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her shoes were practical. Her first-class boarding pass rested inside a plain leather wallet. The terminal hummed around her with rolling suitcases, overhead announcements, and the soft mechanical chime of security scanners. She paused beneath the Sterling Atlantic sign and checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Jonathan Pierce. 1 encrypted file marked final authorization. And a message from her legal advisor. Board ready when you are. Vanessa slipped the phone into her coat pocket and continued toward the private lounge. She had not come merely to sign a contract. She had come to see the airline as ordinary passengers saw it, without ceremony, without privilege, and without anyone knowing her name. What happened next would cost Sterling Atlantic far more than money, because before the morning was over, the company would discover that the woman they believed had no power was the only person in the building who could decide whether their future still existed. Vanessa reached the entrance to the Sterling Crown Lounge at 8:12 that morning, 28 minutes before boarding and 48 minutes before the scheduled contract signing in New York. A brushed brass sign stood beside the doorway, promising privacy, comfort, and exceptional service. Behind it, warm light spilled across cream-colored chairs, polished stone counters, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the runway. Travelers in tailored suits spoke quietly over coffee while aircraft moved beyond the glass like silver pieces on a giant board. Vanessa approached the reception desk and placed her boarding pass beneath the scanner. A soft tone sounded. Then a red light appeared. Melissa Grant, the lounge manager, glanced at the screen before looking at Vanessa. Her eyes moved from the camel-colored coat to the small suitcase, then back to the boarding pass. This entrance is for first-class passengers and invited members, she said. Vanessa kept her voice calm. I understand. That is my boarding pass. Melissa scanned it again. The same red light flashed. She did not check the reservation system. She did not ask for identification. Instead, she pushed the pass back across the counter. The general waiting area is downstairs, near gate 24. Vanessa looked at the pass, then at Melissa. The seat number is 2A. Melissa gave a thin smile that carried no warmth. People sometimes purchase upgrades through unofficial websites. The system catches those errors. Before Vanessa could respond, a white businessman stepped forward from behind her. His scanner also flashed red. Melissa immediately apologized, entered his name manually, and opened the lounge door. The system has been acting up all morning, Mr. Whitmore. Please enjoy your stay. He walked inside without showing identification. Vanessa watched the door close behind him. The difference lasted less than 15 seconds, but it revealed more than any company policy could hide. She turned back to Melissa. Why was his error treated as a technical problem while mine was treated as possible fraud? The sounds around them seemed to soften. A nearby couple stopped speaking. A young gate employee named Ethan Cole looked up from a service tablet several feet away. Melissa straightened her shoulders. I did not say you committed fraud. You said I may have purchased my ticket through an unofficial source. I am explaining how these situations happen. Vanessa placed her identification beside the boarding pass. Then verify the reservation. Melissa did not touch it. Instead, she picked up a phone and pressed a button. Mr. Caldwell, I need assistance at the Crown Lounge. Vanessa checked the time. 24 minutes until boarding. Her phone vibrated inside her pocket, but she ignored it. She had spent years sitting across from people who smiled while moving billions of dollars, and she had learned that character often appeared in the smallest choices, especially when someone believed there would be no consequences. A minute later, Richard Caldwell emerged from a private office near the lounge entrance. He wore a dark navy suit, a silver sterling Atlantic pin, and the practiced expression of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Melissa leaned toward him and spoke quietly, though not quietly enough. She is insisting the ticket is legitimate. Richard took the boarding pass, studied it for barely 3 seconds, and looked at Vanessa. Ma'am, we cannot allow passengers into restricted areas without proper authorization. Vanessa met his eyes. You have not checked my authorization. Richard handed the pass back. I have been doing this for 22 years. I know when something is not right. The scanner chimed again behind him as another traveler entered. Vanessa remained still. Then she asked the question that would later echo through every office at Sterling Atlantic. Is that your final decision, or would you prefer to verify who I am first? Richard did not answer immediately. He looked at Melissa, then at the small group of travelers who had begun pretending not to watch. The silence lasted only a moment, but Vanessa understood what it meant. He was not considering whether he might be wrong. He was deciding how firmly to defend the decision he had already made. My final decision, he said, lowering his voice as if calmness could make the words more reasonable, is that you will remain outside the lounge until we determine how this ticket was issued. Vanessa held his gaze. The reservation is under my legal name. The payment cleared 3 weeks ago. The seat assignment was confirmed yesterday. Richard gave a slight nod that suggested patience, not belief. That may be what you were told. Ethan Cole shifted behind the service counter. He had been with Sterling Atlantic for less than 2 years, long enough to recognize the difference between a system failure and a choice disguised as procedure. He opened the passenger verification screen on his tablet and quietly entered Vanessa's last name. The first result appeared instantly, but a red notice blocked the details. Executive Security Protocol. Restricted access. Ethan frowned. He had never seen that message on an ordinary reservation. Before he could look closer, Melissa noticed him. Ethan, return to your assigned station. He locked the screen, but not before Vanessa saw the change in his expression. She did not need to know exactly what he had found. She only needed to know that someone had finally checked. A boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, followed by the low rumble of an aircraft moving toward the runway. Vanessa glanced toward the windows. Beyond the glass, a Sterling Atlantic jet waited beneath the pale morning light, its tail marked with the silver emblem Jonathan Pierce had once described as a promise of trust. Richard followed her gaze. If you continue delaying this process, you may miss your flight. Vanessa turned back to him. You are the one delaying it. Melissa crossed her arms. There is no reason to become confrontational. Vanessa's expression did not change. I have not raised my voice. I have not interrupted either of you. I have asked for the same verification you provided to the man who entered before me. A few feet away, the white businessman who had been admitted despite the same scanner error lowered his coffee cup. For the first time, discomfort touched his face. Richard noticed. His jaw tightened. This is not about another passenger. It became about another passenger when the same problem received 2 different responses. The words landed cleanly, without anger, and that seemed to trouble him more than a public argument would have. Vanessa had learned long ago that prejudice often depended on confusion. If the target became emotional, the emotion became evidence. If the target remained composed, the composure became defiance. The rules changed because the conclusion had been chosen first. Her phone vibrated again. This time she removed it from her pocket. Jonathan Pierce had sent a message, board assembled. Car waiting in New York. Vanessa read it, then locked the screen. Richard glanced at the phone. You need to step away from the entrance. Before I do, Vanessa said, I want the name and position of the person accepting responsibility for this decision. Melissa's confidence flickered. Richard reached into his jacket and handed Vanessa a business card. Richard Caldwell, Senior Vice President of Premium Operations. She studied the card for 1 second, then placed it carefully inside her wallet. Thank you. That is all I needed. Richard mistook her calm for surrender. He stepped aside and motioned toward the public seating area. Vanessa moved only far enough to clear the entrance. Then she opened a secure message, selected the contact marked General Counsel, and typed 6 words. Begin documenting. Do not intervene yet. Vanessa moved to a row of seats facing the runway and placed her suitcase beside her. She did not leave the lounge entrance. She wanted to see what happened next, not because she expected kindness, but because she had learned that people often revealed their true standards when they believed the moment had already passed. Richard returned to the desk with the satisfaction of a man who thought the matter was finished. Melissa resumed greeting passengers, her smile suddenly warm again. Within 2 minutes, another traveler approached with a boarding pass that failed to scan. He was a white man in his 60s wearing a golf shirt beneath an expensive jacket. Melissa laughed softly, blamed the machine, and waved him through after glancing at his name. Vanessa watched without expression. Ethan watched too. This time, he did not look away. He stepped closer to Richard and spoke in a low voice. Mr. Caldwell, the reservation may be restricted because of an executive security designation. I think we should contact Central Operations. Richard barely turned toward him. You think too much for someone still learning the desk. The system did not reject her ticket. It blocked access to the profile. Melissa stopped smiling. Richard looked toward Vanessa, then back at Ethan. And what exactly are you suggesting? Ethan swallowed. Only that we verify before taking further action. Richard leaned closer. I have already taken action. Do not undermine a senior decision in front of passengers. Ethan nodded, but his face had changed. The unease was gone. In its place was something steadier. He returned to his station and opened the incident log. Vanessa saw his fingers move across the screen. A record was being created. At 8:18, a gate agent announced pre-boarding for Flight 206 to New York. Vanessa checked her watch. 22 minutes remained before departure. Her meeting was scheduled less than an hour after landing, but the private contract team could delay the signing. The greater question was whether Sterling Atlantic deserved the agreement at all. Her phone vibrated with a reply from General Counsel. Documentation active. Executive team awaiting instruction. Vanessa typed nothing. Not yet. Across the terminal, Richard walked toward her with Melissa beside him. His expression had lost its polished calm. Ma'am, we need to inspect your travel documents and the contents of your bag before we can reconsider access. Vanessa stood slowly. On what basis? Security compliance. Has every passenger with a scanner error been asked to open a bag? Richard glanced toward the lounge. Your situation is different. Explain how. Melissa answered before he could. Because your documents appear inconsistent with your profile. Vanessa looked at her. You have not opened my profile. The words stopped Melissa cold. Richard recovered quickly. Refusal to cooperate may affect your ability to board. Several nearby travelers were openly watching now. One woman lowered her newspaper. A father standing with 2 children moved closer, listening. Ethan remained behind the desk, but his tablet was angled toward the scene. Vanessa rested one hand on the suitcase handle. I will cooperate with any lawful and consistently applied policy. I will not participate in a rule invented only for me. Richard exhaled through his nose. Then perhaps you should travel with another airline. The sentence was quiet, but it carried farther than he intended. Vanessa studied him for a long moment. There it was. Not a misunderstanding. Not a technical failure. A choice. She opened her suitcase herself, not because he had earned the right to demand it, but because she wanted witnesses to see exactly what followed. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a leather portfolio, and a sealed folder bearing the Orion Global emblem. Melissa reached toward it. Vanessa placed her hand over the folder. That contains confidential corporate material. Richard gave a dismissive smile. Anyone can print a logo. Ethan looked up sharply. Vanessa did not react. She simply asked, "Would you like to reconsider that statement before it becomes part of the official record?" Richard's smile faded, but only for a second. "There is no official record," he said. "This is a customer service matter." Vanessa looked past him toward Ethan. "Is that correct?" Ethan hesitated, then glanced at the incident log still open on his tablet. "No, ma'am. Once a passenger dispute is entered into the system, the time, location, employee identification numbers, and actions taken are preserved." Melissa turned toward him. "Ethan." Her voice carried a warning. He did not close the screen. Richard's face hardened. "You are done here. Go assist at gate 20. Ethan stayed where he was. "The flight is not boarding at gate 20. The nearby passengers fell silent again. Vanessa noticed the father with 2 children raise his phone, not dramatically, but carefully, holding it near his chest. Another traveler did the same. Richard noticed too. Public attention changed his posture. He straightened his jacket and lowered his voice. "Let us all remain professional." Vanessa kept one hand over the sealed folder. "Professional would have been verifying my reservation when I first asked. We are trying to verify it now." "No. You are trying to justify a conclusion you reached before checking anything." Melissa stepped closer to the open suitcase. "If the documents are legitimate, there should not be a problem." Vanessa's eyes settled on her hand. "Do not touch that folder." Melissa stopped, but Richard reached into his pocket and removed his personal phone. He angled it toward the Orion global emblem. Vanessa saw the screen brighten. "Are you photographing confidential material?" she asked. "I am documenting the situation." "On a personal device?" Richard lowered the phone, though not before Ethan saw what he had done. Vanessa closed the suitcase and secured the latch. "Your company's privacy policy prohibits employees from capturing passenger documents on personal devices." Richard's confidence slipped again. "You seem unusually familiar with our policies." "I read contracts before I sign them." The sentence was quiet. Melissa frowned, but Richard dismissed it with a short laugh. "This has gone far enough. Your boarding privilege is suspended pending review." The overhead speaker announced final pre-boarding for Flight 206. Vanessa looked at the clock above the gate. 18 minutes remained. Her phone vibrated. This time, the message came from Orion Global's General Counsel, Dana Whitaker. "Executive team ready. Clause 14 can be activated immediately." Vanessa read the words slowly. Clause 14 was not a routine cancellation provision. It had been negotiated after 3 months of legal review and 2 rounds of board approval. It allowed Orion Global to suspend the entire partnership if Sterling Atlantic demonstrated material failures in ethics, privacy, or non-discrimination standards before final execution. The clause existed because Vanessa believed culture mattered as much as numbers. A company could recover from delayed technology. It could recover from a failed route. It could not safely carry millions of people if its leaders believed dignity was optional. She looked at Richard. "Before you suspend anything, call Jonathan Pierce." Richard's expression shifted at the mention of the chairman's name, but pride moved faster than caution. "Mr. Pierce does not handle passenger complaints." "Call him anyway." "I will not disturb the chairman because you are unhappy with a lounge decision." Vanessa nodded once. "Then I am giving you one final opportunity. Verify my identity through executive operations, restore my boarding access, and document what happened accurately." Melissa folded her arms. "Or what?" Vanessa did not look at her. She looked only at Richard. "Or the next decision will not belong to you." Richard gave a cold smile, mistaking restraint for weakness one last time. "Your request is denied." Vanessa unlocked her phone, opened the secure legal channel, and typed 4 words that would reach New York before her flight ever left the gate. "Activate Clause 14 now." The message left Vanessa's phone at 8:23 in the morning. In New York, Dana Whitaker received it inside the conference room where Sterling Atlantic senior leadership had already gathered around the final contract. She read the instruction once, then placed her hand over the folder in front of her. "Stop the signing," she said. Jonathan Pierce looked up from the presentation screen. "What happened?" Dana's answer was careful. "A potential ethics, privacy, and discrimination breach involving senior Sterling personnel. Clause 14 has been activated." The room changed instantly. Legal advisors began opening files. Financial officers stopped whispering. The presentation showing projected growth across 5 years remained frozen on the wall, but no one was looking at the numbers anymore. Jonathan reached for his phone and called Vanessa. She watched his name appear on the screen, but did not answer. Not yet. Richard saw the incoming call and frowned. You should take that somewhere else. Vanessa slipped the phone back into her coat pocket. I will take it when this conversation is properly documented. Richard turned toward Melissa. Contact airport security. Tell them we have a passenger refusing instructions. Ethan stepped forward. She has followed every instruction except allowing private corporate material to be photographed. Richard's head snapped toward him. You are no longer part of this matter. I entered the incident, Ethan said. His voice shook slightly, but he continued. I also recorded that the scanner error affected multiple passengers and that only Dr. Brooks was asked to open her luggage. Melissa's face tightened at the name. Dr. Brooks. Ethan looked at the tablet. That is how the secure profile identifies her. Richard reached for the device. Ethan moved it behind the counter. The record is already synchronized with central operations. For the first time, Richard said nothing. The confidence that had carried him through every earlier decision began to fracture beneath the weight of facts he could no longer control. Vanessa closed her suitcase and stood beside it. There is still time to correct the immediate harm, she said. Restore my access. Preserve every record. Instruct Mr. Caldwell to delete any photograph taken on his personal phone, under supervision, and notify your privacy office. Richard recovered enough to laugh, but the sound was thin. You do not give orders here. Vanessa looked at him with the patience of someone hearing a mistake repeat itself. No, I make decisions about where my company places its trust. Before he could respond, the lounge phone rang. Melissa answered. Her expression changed almost immediately. Yes, sir, she said, straightening. He is here. She looked at Richard. It is central operations. They want you on the line. Richard took the receiver. Caldwell speaking. He listened. The color slowly left his face. There must be some misunderstanding. Another pause. No, I did not contact Mr. Pierce. His eyes moved toward Vanessa. Yes, she is still here. Everyone nearby seemed to understand that the balance had shifted, even if they did not yet know why. Richard lowered his voice. Who exactly is she? The answer came through the receiver, unheard by the passengers, but visible in his expression. His shoulders stiffened. His grip tightened around the phone. Melissa searched his face for guidance and found none. Richard ended the call without saying goodbye. Vanessa's phone vibrated again. This time, she answered. Jonathan Pierce's voice came through clearly enough for those closest to hear. Dr. Brooks, I am at the airport and walking toward the lounge now. Please do not leave. We need to address this immediately. Vanessa looked through the glass entrance. At the far end of the terminal, a group of executives in dark suits was moving quickly through the crowd. Richard followed her gaze, and the last traces of certainty disappeared from his face. The executives reached the lounge at 8:27 in the morning. Jonathan Pierce was first, moving faster than anyone had ever seen the chairman of Sterling Atlantic move through an airport. Behind him came the company's general counsel, the chief operations officer, 2 members of the board, and Dana Whitaker, who had flown in the night before to complete the final legal review. The sight of them silenced the entire area. Melissa stepped back from the desk. Richard tried to compose himself, smoothing the front of his jacket as though appearance could repair judgment. Jonathan did not look at either of them. His attention went directly to Vanessa. Dr. Brooks, he said, stopping several feet away, I am deeply sorry. The words traveled across the lounge entrance. A few passengers exchanged confused looks. Richard's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Jonathan continued. Your reservation should have been protected under executive protocol. Your identity should have been verified immediately. None of this should have happened. Vanessa stood beside her suitcase, calm and still. The reservation was not the problem. Jonathan glanced toward Richard and Melissa. Then tell me what was. Vanessa did not raise her voice. She did not need to. I was denied access after presenting a valid first-class ticket. 2 white passengers experienced the same scanner error and were admitted without question. I was accused of using an illegitimate ticket, asked to open my luggage, and threatened with the loss of my boarding privilege. Mr. Caldwell photographed confidential corporate material on his personal phone. When I asked him to contact you, he refused. Each sentence removed another layer of protection from Richard's position. Jonathan turned slowly. Is that accurate? Richard swallowed. There were security concerns. What concerns? Dana asked. Her voice was measured, but every word carried legal weight. The system restricted the profile. Ethan stepped forward before Richard could reshape the story. The system marked the profile as executive protected. It did not reject the ticket. I told Mr. Caldwell that Central Operations should be contacted. Jonathan looked at Ethan. And what did he do? He dismissed the warning and ordered me away from the desk. Melissa tried to speak. We were following procedure. Vanessa looked at her. Which procedure required only my bag to be opened? Melissa had no answer. The father holding his phone lowered it slightly, but the recording continued. Jonathan turned back to Vanessa. We will correct this immediately. You cannot correct what has already revealed itself, she said. You can only decide whether you are willing to face it honestly. Richard stepped forward. Dr. Brooks, had we known who you were, this would have been handled differently. The moment he said it, the entire lounge seemed to freeze. Vanessa's expression changed for the first time. Not with anger, with disappointment. That is exactly the problem, she said. Richard stared at her. Vanessa continued. You believe the failure was not recognizing my title. The failure was believing I needed a title to deserve basic respect. No one moved. Jonathan looked down, as though the truth had landed somewhere heavier than reputation. Vanessa reached into her suitcase and removed the sealed Airline Global folder. She placed it on the counter between them. This contains the final partnership documents. $4.8 billion in technology, cargo infrastructure, and long-term route expansion. Richard's face tightened as the number became real. Jonathan looked at the folder, then at Vanessa. Is the agreement still suspended? Yes. Can it be restored? Vanessa let the silence stretch. Then she turned toward Ethan. Did you preserve the full incident record? Yes, Dr. Brooks. Including the scanner logs, employee actions, and timestamps? Yes. She nodded. Good. Jonathan's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing another layer beneath the crisis. Vanessa looked at him. The identity reveal is not the end of this review. It is the beginning. Dana opened her legal file. Under Clause 14, Airline Global has the right to conduct an immediate ethical compliance audit before deciding whether Sterling Atlantic remains eligible for partnership. Richard looked toward the sealed folder as if it were moving farther away from him. Vanessa rested her hand beside it. I did not come here only as a passenger. I came to learn how your company treats people when it believes no one important is watching. For several seconds, no one spoke. The airport continued around them with distant announcements, rolling luggage, and the steady movement of travelers who had no idea that a multibillion-dollar agreement was now balanced on a single question of character. Jonathan Pierce looked at Vanessa, then at Richard, then at Melissa. Was this visit part of the final review? He asked. Vanessa nodded. Airline Global was not only evaluating aircraft systems and cargo capacity. We were evaluating judgment. Your company requested access to technology that would influence millions of passenger decisions, route assignments, and security operations. That kind of power cannot be trusted to an organization that applies standards differently depending on who is standing at the counter. Dana Whitaker opened the sealed legal file and removed a marked copy of the partnership agreement. Clause 14 authorizes immediate suspension when material evidence suggests discrimination, privacy violations, or leadership misconduct. All three may be present here. Richard looked at Jonathan. This was one misunderstanding. Ethan spoke before anyone else could answer. It was a sequence of decisions. His voice was steadier now. The ticket was valid. The security notice was ignored. Other passengers with the same scanner error were admitted. Dr. Brooks was treated as suspicious before anyone verified her name. Then private documents were photographed after she warned that they were confidential. Richard turned toward him. You are making assumptions. No, Ethan said. I am reading the incident record. Vanessa watched Jonathan absorb the difference. This was no longer about protecting a senior employee or calming an angry customer. Every action had been time-stamped. Every warning had been preserved. Every opportunity to correct the situation had been refused. Melissa looked toward the waiting passengers and finally seemed to understand how many witnesses were present. We can apologize, she said quietly. Vanessa met her eyes. An apology matters only when it includes the truth. Melissa lowered her gaze. Jonathan stepped toward the counter. Richard, surrender your company phone and your personal phone to legal counsel. Melissa, you are relieved of duty pending an independent investigation. Ethan, preserve every record and send copies directly to the board audit committee. Richard stared at him. You cannot do this in front of passengers. Jonathan's expression did not change. You made the decisions in front of passengers. Dana extended her hand for the phones. Richard hesitated, then placed them on the counter. The movement was small, almost ordinary, but the meaning traveled through the lounge. Authority had shifted without shouting, without threats, and without a single dramatic gesture. Vanessa checked the clock. Flight 206 was now boarding first-class passengers. A gate agent approached carefully and offered to escort her on board. Vanessa declined. My travel plans have changed. Jonathan looked alarmed. We can hold the flight. That would delay 200 people who had nothing to do with this. She closed her suitcase and turned to Dana. Begin the full audit. Include passenger complaints from the past 5 years, employee discipline records, privacy incidents, and all discrimination claims involving premium operations. Richard's face tightened. You are going to judge an entire company because of one morning? Vanessa looked at him. No. This morning only showed us where to begin looking. Jonathan stepped closer. Dr. Brooks, give us the opportunity to prove this is not our culture. Vanessa glanced at the Sterling Atlantic emblem above the lounge entrance. Culture is not what a company writes on a wall. It is what employees feel permitted to do when leadership is absent. Her phone vibrated again. A message from Orion Global's strategy office appeared. Contingency partner ready for immediate negotiations. Vanessa read it, then looked through the glass at the aircraft waiting beyond the terminal. Sterling Atlantic had believed the audit was finished. In reality, the most expensive part had just begun. By 9:15 that morning, Vanessa Brooks was no longer waiting for a flight. She was seated in a private conference room 3 floors above the terminal with Dana Whitaker, Jonathan Pierce, Ethan Cole, and Sterling Atlantic's full legal team. Outside the glass walls, aircraft continued arriving and departing on schedule, but inside the room, the future of the airline had stopped moving. The audit began with the incident record. Then came earlier complaints. One passenger had reported being questioned twice after presenting a valid first-class ticket. Another had been removed from a lounge while co-workers with identical access were admitted. Several employees had raised concerns about inconsistent treatment, but the reports had been closed as isolated misunderstandings. Vanessa read every summary without changing her expression. The problem was larger than Richard Caldwell. It was a system that had learned to call patterns accidents. Jonathan sat across from her, pale and silent. We failed, he finally said. Yes, Vanessa replied. But failure is not the same as accountability. Dana placed 2 documents on the table. The first formally terminated the Orion partnership. The second authorized immediate negotiations with Horizon Meridian, Sterling Atlantic's largest competitor. Jonathan looked at the figures and understood the cost before anyone explained it. Orion's technology would now modernize another airline's cargo network, booking systems, international expansion, and customer service infrastructure. The projected value over 10 years exceeded $6 billion. Sterling Atlantic was not merely losing an investment. It was handing its strongest rival the future it had expected to own. Is there anything we can do to restore the agreement? Jonathan asked. Vanessa looked through the glass toward the terminal below. You can rebuild your company. You cannot purchase my trust after learning what it costs. By noon, Sterling Atlantic announced an independent investigation. Richard and Melissa were placed on administrative leave. The board ordered a review of every discrimination and privacy complaint from the previous 5 years. Ethan was promoted to a compliance role reporting directly to the audit committee, not because he had been perfect, but because when the moment demanded courage, he chose the record over the hierarchy. Weeks later, Horizon Meridian announced its partnership with Orion Global from a stage in Baltimore. Vanessa stood before reporters beneath a screen displaying new routes, new jobs, and a nationwide passenger fairness program built into every service decision. A journalist asked whether the deal was revenge. Vanessa paused before answering. Revenge would have been making 2 people suffer because they embarrassed me. This was a business decision based on what their choices revealed. Another reporter asked what she wanted Sterling Atlantic to learn. Vanessa looked directly into the cameras. A company does not reveal its values when it recognizes someone powerful. It reveals its values when it believes the person in front of it has no power at all. Months later, Sterling Atlantic's board adopted reforms that should have existed long before that morning. Some leaders resigned. Others stayed and did the harder work of changing the culture they had ignored. Vanessa never returned to the Crown Lounge, but her absence remained there like an invisible sign. Every scanner tone, every disputed ticket, every passenger standing quietly at the counter became a reminder of what one careless decision had exposed. They believed they were judging whether she belonged in a first-class lounge. In the end, she was judging whether they belonged in the future. They did not lose billions because she was powerful. They lost billions because they believed she was powerless.